A millionaire marries a McDonald's waitress for a dare, but discovers something no one could have imagined. The will was as absurd as the expression on the face of the lawyer reading it. Nathan Phillips adjusted his navy blue tie as he watched the gray-haired man on the other side of the polished mahogany desk try to maintain his professional composure. "Repeat that again, Mr. Henderson," Nathan asked, leaning forward in his leather chair in the office located on the 47th floor of the Phillips Tower in Manhattan. "Your father, Robert Phillips," Henderson huffed, "made it a condition for you to inherit control of Phillips Enterprises that you must, well, marry the first person who sees you at the McDonald's in Times Square today at 2:30. Nathan ran a hand through his neatly trimmed brown hair, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. "My father always had a quirky sense of humor, but this is ridiculous even by his standards." "The will is legally valid," Henderson continued, adjusting his thin-rimmed glasses. "If you don't fulfill this condition within 30 days, all the company's shares will be transferred to a charitable trust." Phillips Enterprises, one of the largest investment holding companies in the United States, was worth billions. Nathan checked his Rolex at 13:45. His father had died only 3 days before, and even from the grave he could manipulate his life. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Mackenzie Walsh was adjusting her fake McDonald's badge in the employee changing room. Her green eyes reflected in the mirror the determination of years of FBI training. Operation Golden Arches was about to begin. "Agent Walsh, position confirmed?" Senior Agent Carlton's voice sounded discreetly in her earpiece. "Positive," she replied quietly, checking that her blonde hair was properly secured. "Target should be here in 45 minutes. The Bureau had been investigating Phillips Enterprises for 2 years, suspecting an elaborate money laundering network involving its international subsidiaries. Robert Phillips had been the prime suspect until his sudden death, and now Nathan was the key to unraveling the whole scheme. Nathan walked through the doors of McDonald's at exactly 2:30 p.m., his Italian suit completely at odds with the casual atmosphere. His hands were sweating as he approached the counter, where Mackenzie was waiting for him with a rehearsed smile. "Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?" Her voice was smooth, unprofessional, perfectly masking her years of experience in covert operations. Nathan stared at her for a moment, studying her young face and intelligent eyes. "Actually," he began, hesitantly, "this is going to sound completely insane, but I need to make you an offer." Mackenzie arched an eyebrow, perfectly playing her role as the surprised employee. "A proposal?" "Marriage," he said quickly, lowering his voice. "I know it sounds crazy, but I can explain everything. I can offer you a very generous financial deal." The restaurant was relatively empty at that time between lunch and dinner, but some nearby customers turned their heads, intrigued by the unusual scene. "You're proposing to me? Right here? Now?" Mackenzie asked, her controlled voice hiding the fact that every word of this conversation was being recorded by the FBI. "Yes," Nathan replied, wiping his hand across his face in a gesture of genuine nervousness. "Look, how about we talk after your shift? I promise to explain everything." Mackenzie consulted her supervisor, actually another undercover agent, who nodded discreetly. "I finish at 5 p.m. "Great," Nathan breathed in relief. "I'll meet you in the lobby of Phillips Tower. It's nearby." "All right," she agreed, her heart racing not because of the situation, but because of the ease with which the plan was unfolding. At 5:15 p.m., Mackenzie entered the imposing lobby of the Phillips Tower, now wearing the casual but elegant clothes she had brought in her backpack. Nathan was waiting for her, still looking nervous, but more composed. "First of all," he began, leading her to a discreet cafe on the mezzanine, "I want to apologize for the way I approached you. My name is Nathan Phillips." "Mackenzie Walsh," she introduced herself, using her real name in accordance with the operations protocol. "And yes, you owe me a very good explanation." Over the next hour, Nathan explained about his father's eccentric will, the family business, and the 30-day deadline. Mackenzie listened attentively, asking calculated questions that seemed natural for someone in her supposed position. "So," she said after a long sip of coffee, "you're offering me a marriage of convenience?" "Exactly," Nathan confirmed. "1 year of marriage, then we divorce amicably. You get $5 million and a confidentiality agreement." Mackenzie pretended to consider the proposal, knowing that every moment of this conversation was crucial to the investigation. "What if I say yes?" "We can do everything officially tomorrow," Nathan replied, a relieved smile appearing on his face. "I have lawyers who can prepare all the necessary documents." What Nathan didn't know was that, while they were talking, an FBI team was monitoring every word through the hidden device in Mackenzie's necklace. What Mackenzie didn't know was that Nathan carried his own secrets and that his cooperation with another government agency was about to make everything much more complicated. "I need to think a bit," she said, getting up. "Can I give you an answer tomorrow?" "Sure," he replied, handing her his card. "Call me when you've decided." That night, in her apartment in Brooklyn, Mackenzie drafted her initial report for the FBI, while Nathan, in his penthouse on the Upper East Side, made an encrypted call to his own contacts at the DEA. Both would sleep restlessly, their minds occupied not only with their respective missions, but with the undeniable connection they had felt, a complication that neither had foreseen in their training. The operation was underway, but the game had only just begun, and somewhere, Robert Phillips' spirit was probably smiling, knowing that his last act had set in motion events that would change much more than just the future of his company. The next morning, Mackenzie sat in a discreet meeting room in the FBI's Manhattan office, staring at the photos spread out on the table. Financial documents, international transfer records, and photographs of Robert Phillips in suspicious encounters with known criminals formed an incriminating mosaic. "What do you think of him?" asked Agent Carlton, pouring himself a cup of coffee as he watched his best agent analyze the material. "Nathan looks different from his father," Mackenzie replied, remembering the genuine vulnerability she had seen in his eyes during their conversation over coffee. "There's something about him that doesn't fit the profile we've built up." "Don't let a pretty face and polite manners fool you, Walsh," Carlton warned, taking a seat opposite her. "Robert Phillips was also known for his charm." Mackenzie nodded, but something in her gut, the same instinct that had made her one of the Bureau's best undercover agents, told her there was more to the story. Her phone vibrated with a message from Nathan asking if she had made up her mind. "I'm going to accept the offer," she informed Carlton, who smiled with satisfaction. "But I need assurances that we will have adequate support to keep my cover." Meanwhile, in a discreet cafe in Greenwich Village, Nathan met with his DEA contact, Agent Rachel Morrison. The location had been strategically chosen away from the watchful eyes of the corporate world that knew him. "Your father left a complex trail," Rachel commented, discreetly sliding a folder across the table. "We have evidence of connections to Mexican cartels using Phillips Enterprises subsidiaries as a front. And you think this arranged marriage could jeopardize the operation?" Nathan asked, his concern genuine. "On the contrary," Rachel smiled. "It could be just what we need to access the internal files without arousing suspicion." "Your fiancé works at McDonald's, right?" Nathan confirmed, feeling a twinge of guilt for involving an innocent girl in this whole plot. "She seems special, different from what I expected." Rachel arched an eyebrow. "Stay focused, Nathan. We can't risk 2 years of investigation because of feelings." Nathan's phone vibrated with a message from Mackenzie accepting his proposal. His heart raced inexplicably. In the early afternoon, they met in Dr. Henderson's office to finalize the preliminary documents. Mackenzie looked stunning in a professional blue dress, while Nathan had opted for a gray suit that highlighted his eyes. "The terms are pretty straightforward," Henderson explained, handing out the contracts. "Civil marriage tomorrow, 1-year engagement, confidentiality agreement, and financial compensation as discussed." As they signed the papers, their fingers accidentally brushed against the table. The brief contact sent an electric current through both of them, making them exchange a quick, nervous glance. "We need to make this convincing," Nathan commented as they left the office. "How about dinner tonight? Get to know each other better?" Mackenzie hesitated, conscious of the discreet earpiece in her ear. "Sure," she replied, ignoring Carlton's silent warning about keeping an emotional distance. They chose an Italian restaurant in Little Italy, public enough to seem appropriate, but intimate enough for real conversation. Between plates of handmade pasta and glasses of red wine, they began to build their cover story. "How are we going to explain this to the press?" Mackenzie asked, genuinely curious about how Nathan planned to manage the inevitable scandal. "The truth, in part," he replied, playing with his napkin, "that we met in an unconventional way and decided to give fate a chance. What about your family? Friends?" "My mother passed away when I was a child," Nathan revealed, and Mackenzie noticed that this pain was genuine. "And as for friends, let's just say that in my position, it's hard to know who's real." Mackenzie felt her heart squeeze, recognizing the loneliness in his words. It was the same kind of isolation that his profession often demanded. "What about you?" he asked. "Family in Manhattan?" "No," she replied, keeping close to the truth of her cover story. "I came to New York chasing dreams. I ended up at McDonald's temporarily, until I met a desperate billionaire," Nathan joked, making her laugh genuinely. The evening progressed, and with each glass of wine, each story shared, the layers of their respective masks began to dissolve dangerously. They were both professionals trained in maintaining cover, but there was something about each other's vulnerability that made it difficult to keep the barriers up. When Nathan dropped her off at her apartment in Brooklyn, carefully prepared by the FBI to sustain her cover, they both hesitated at the moment of parting. "So, tomorrow," Mackenzie said softly. "Tomorrow," Nathan confirmed, leaning over to kiss her cheek in a gesture that should have been just to keep up appearances, but which left them both disturbed by its naturalness. That night, in their respective apartments, they both stared at their reflections in the bathroom mirrors, confronting the complexities of their missions. Mackenzie removed the listening device, allowing herself a few moments of privacy to process her conflicting emotions. Nathan, for his part, stayed awake for hours, going over files from the DEA investigation, trying to focus on the mission rather than Mackenzie's smile. What neither of them knew was that, while they were preparing for their wedding of convenience, bigger forces were already at work. In a penthouse in Miami, a former business partner of Robert Phillips was watching the news about the Phillips heirs' impending marriage with growing concern. Some secrets needed to remain buried, and he would not allow an unexpected romance to threaten years of careful criminal planning. Manhattan's Municipal Registry Office had never witnessed such a peculiar ceremony. Nathan nervously adjusted his burgundy tie as he watched Mackenzie enter the hall. She had opted for an elegant and understated off-white ensemble, suitable for a bride who supposedly worked at McDonald's, but which nevertheless emanated a natural sophistication that caught the eye of everyone present. "You look beautiful," Nathan whispered as she approached, and for the first time since starting her FBI assignment, Mackenzie felt her cheeks genuinely blush. The ceremony was brief and efficient. When the judge declared them man and wife, the kiss they exchanged supposedly just to keep up appearances lasted a second longer than necessary, leaving them both disturbed by the unexpected electricity of the moment. Outside the registry office, photographers were already waiting. The news of the Phillips heirs' flash wedding had strategically leaked to the press, part of the plan to control the public narrative. "Mr. Phillips, how did you meet your fiancée? Ms. Walsh, what attracted you to the Phillips heir? Is it true that you met in a fast food joint?" Nathan held Mackenzie's hand tightly as they navigated their way through the sea of reporters to the waiting limousine. Inside the vehicle, they both breathed a sigh of relief. "You were great in there," Nathan commented, pouring 2 glasses of champagne. "You weren't bad either," she replied, accepting the drink while discreetly adjusting the listening device in her earring. What was supposed to be an intimate celebration at the exclusive Lou Bernardine restaurant was transformed into a strategic social event. Phillips Enterprises executives, prominent Manhattan figures, and a few select friends gathered to celebrate the unlikely union that dominated the headlines. Between toasts, Mackenzie carefully observed the interactions. Her FBI training allowed her to identify nuances in conversations, suspicious glances exchanged between some guests, especially when the name of Robert Phillips was mentioned. "That's Vincent Dawson over there," Nathan murmured discreetly as they danced. "He was my father's right-hand man." Mackenzie felt her heart race. Dawson was a central figure in the FBI investigation, suspected of coordinating international money laundering operations. "He doesn't seem very happy about the wedding," she observed, noticing the cold looks the executive was casting in her direction. "No one who was close to my father is," Nathan replied, his hand unconsciously tightening around her waist. They expected me to lose the inheritance. Across the hall, Vincent Dawson made a discreet call. She's not who she says she is. We need to act quickly. The celebration went late into the night. When they finally arrived at Nathan's apartment, now officially the couple's home, the exhaustion of the day weighed heavily on both of them. "I've had the guest room prepared for you," Nathan informed them, showing them the luxurious space overlooking Central Park. "Thank you," Mackenzie replied, feeling a confusing mixture of relief and disappointment. Later, alone in her room, she reviewed the day's notes on her specially configured FBI tablet. Something about the reactions of certain guests, especially Dawson, bothered her. There was a tension in the air that went beyond surprise at the sudden wedding. In the office of the apartment, Nathan was also awake, analyzing confidential DEA documents. The connections between his father and the cartels ran deeper than he had imagined, and now he feared that his marriage to Mackenzie could put her in real danger. The next morning, the New York Times ran a photo of the newlyweds kissing in its social section. "McDonald's fairy tale," the headline read. If only they had known that the two protagonists of this story slept in separate bedrooms, each carrying secrets that could destroy not only their sham marriage, but potentially their lives. Mackenzie was preparing coffee in the kitchen when Nathan emerged from the office, looking as if he hadn't slept at all. "We have a board meeting today," he informed her, accepting the cup she offered. "As my wife, you have the right to attend." "Are you sure that's a good idea?" she asked, aware that every minute in that room would be recorded by the FBI. "Actually, I insist," Nathan replied, his eyes conveying a message she couldn't fully decipher. What neither of them knew was that their respective superiors at both the FBI and the DEA were also planning to use that meeting to advance their parallel investigations. And Vincent Dawson, after a series of late-night phone calls, had set in motion a plan that threatened to expose not just one, but both undercover agents. As they prepared to face the day, Mackenzie and Nathan danced a delicate waltz of half-truths and omissions, each protecting their secrets while fighting the growing attraction that threatened to further complicate their already complex situation. Somewhere in Miami, the same man who had watched the news of the wedding was boarding a flight to New York, carrying a briefcase with information that could unmask both Mackenzie and Nathan. The game was about to get a lot more dangerous, and the newlyweds still had no idea how much their lives were about to change. The meeting room on the 50th floor of Phillips Tower emanated power. Mackenzie sat next to Nathan, watching the 15 members of the board of directors take their seats around the imposing black marble oval table. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan stretched out like a giant chessboard, an apt metaphor for the dangerous game taking place in that room. Vincent Dawson took his chair to Nathan's right, his impeccable Italian suit contrasting with the tense expression on his face. "Gentlemen, today we have the honor of welcoming the new Mrs. Phillips to our quarterly meeting," he announced, his voice distilling a subtle sarcasm that went unnoticed by anyone. Mackenzie maintained her polite smile, but her trained eyes caught every suspicious movement, every glance exchanged between the executives. Her listening device, cleverly camouflaged in an elegant brooch, transmitted everything to the FBI surveillance van parked 3 blocks away. "Before we begin," Nathan interjected, his firm voice filling the room, "I'd like to present some structural changes I intend to implement in the company." An uneasy murmur ran through the room. Mackenzie noticed how Dawson discreetly pressed the button on his smartwatch, a seemingly innocent gesture that set her agent instincts off. "As the new CEO, I intend to do a full audit of all our international operations," Nathan continued, sliding tablets to each board member, "especially in the subsidiaries in Mexico and Panama." Mackenzie felt the tension in the room reach palpable levels. 3 of the older executives exchanged worried glances, while Dawson maintained a studied calm that seemed almost artificial. "This is unexpected," Dawson commented, flicking through the documents on his tablet. "Considering that your father has always preferred to maintain regional autonomy in our operations." "My father is no longer here," Nathan replied dryly, "and as CEO, I intend to have full transparency in all our business dealings." As the meeting continued with financial presentations and strategic discussions, Mackenzie noticed movement in the corridor through the glass walls. A man she recognized from FBI photos, Marcus Rodriguez, a known middleman for Mexican cartels, was talking discreetly to Dawson's secretary. Her heart raced. Rodriguez's presence was not on the FBI's intelligence reports for that day. Something was wrong. "Excuse me," she whispered to Nathan, standing up gracefully. "I need to use the restroom." In the hallway, Mackenzie activated the emergency mode on her communication device, quickly typing in a code that would alert her team to Rodriguez's unexpected presence. She was so focused that she almost didn't notice Dawson approaching. "Lost, Mrs. Phillips?" His voice surprised her. "Just looking for the restroom," she smiled, keeping her composure. "End of the corridor on the right," Dawson indicated, his cold eyes studying every inch of her face. "You know, I've done some interesting research on you. Fascinating how some records just don't exist." The comment made her blood run cold, but years of training allowed her to keep her expression neutral. "I don't understand what you mean, Mr. Dawson." "I'm sure you don't," he smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Enjoy the rest of the meeting." Back in the room, Mackenzie found Nathan standing, presenting his plans for corporate restructuring. There was something different about his posture, a barely disguised urgency in his words that she hadn't noticed before. The meeting stretched on for another 2 hours, every minute charged with subterranean tension. When it finally ended, Nathan and Mackenzie entered their private elevator. "Something's wrong," they both said simultaneously as soon as the doors closed. Surprised by the synchrony, they exchanged intense glances. For a moment, the air between them was charged not just with suspicion, but with a different, more dangerous electricity. "I saw Marcus Rodriguez in the hallway," Mackenzie revealed. Deciding to risk sharing this information, Nathan paled visibly. "Impossible. He should be in Mexico." "Do you know him?" "From company reports," Nathan answered, too quickly. The elevator arrived at the penthouse where they kept their front apartment. As soon as they entered, Nathan immediately checked the security systems, while Mackenzie discreetly checked that there were no new listening devices. "We need to talk," Nathan declared, pouring 2 shots of whiskey. About how we're going to protect each other without revealing our secrets," he replied, his eyes fixed on hers. Mackenzie felt her heart skip a beat. Did he know? Or was he just playing green? Before she could reply, her phone vibrated with a message from Agent Carlton. "Rodriguez bought a ticket to Miami. He's carrying something in his diplomatic bag. Interception in progress." At the same time, Nathan's phone received a message from DEA Agent Morrison. "Dawson made contact. Operation compromised. Prepare extraction protocol." They both stared at their phones, then at each other, stuck in a moment of decision. The attraction between them was undeniable, but the secrets they kept could destroy not only their careers, but potentially their lives. "Nathan," Mackenzie began, her voice softer than usual, "I need to tell you something." A sound of breaking glass downstairs interrupted her confession. Red laser lights appeared on the walls, and the security system began to sound silently. "Get down," Nathan shouted, pulling her back from the sofa as the sound of heavy footsteps echoed up the fire escape. Their bodies close, hearts racing, they both knew that the moment of truth had arrived. But before any confession could be made, the penthouse door exploded, and the New York night was lit up by bursts of gunfire. Chaos ensued in the penthouse in a matter of seconds. Nathan and Mackenzie moved in perfect sync, as if they had trained together for years, an irony that neither of them had time to appreciate at the moment. "Emergency exit through the kitchen," Nathan shouted, pulling a Glock pistol from a secret compartment under the coffee table. Mackenzie had already pulled her own gun from her thigh, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by Nathan. Their gazes met briefly with surprise, understanding, and something deeper mixing in an electric moment. "FBI?" he asked, as they moved in tactical formation through cover. "DEA?" she retorted, covering her left flank with professional precision. Another shot rang out through the living room window, shattering a Ming vase. 3 masked men advanced through the main entrance, while the sound of footsteps indicated more invaders coming up the service staircase. "Omega Protocol," a gruff voice ordered over the radio from one of the attackers. "Take them both out." Nathan and Mackenzie looked at each other again, this time with mutual understanding. Their individual missions would have to wait until survival was the priority. "Trust me?" Nathan asked, indicating the kitchen window with a gesture. "Considering we've both been lying to each other from the start," Mackenzie replied with a wry smile. "Funnily enough, yes." Nathan pressed a hidden button on the kitchen panel, revealing a compartment with tactical equipment. Within seconds, they were both wearing bulletproof vests and preparing for what would be a 47-story descent down the building's facade. "The emergency system has been compromised," Nathan quickly explained, as he prepared the abseiling equipment. "Dawson must have hacked the security. Rodriguez is coordinating from the first floor," Mackenzie added, checking the communications on her FBI device. "Extraction team on the way, but it'll take 15 minutes. A new attack forced them to dock." Mackenzie responded with 2 precise shots, neutralizing one of the invaders. Nathan admired her definitely federal training technique. "My father," Nathan began. As he prepared the ropes, he found out about the joint FBI-Day operation, hence the bizarre will. He wanted to ensure that 2 different agencies infiltrated each other simultaneously. Mackenzie completed the thought, finally understanding, so that one would discover the other. "And set us on a collision course," Nathan agreed, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and frustration at his father's elaborate plan. More shots, closer now. The smell of gunpowder mingled with the aroma of the dinner they never got to eat, still in the oven. 3 on the right, Mackenzie warned, spinning to hit 2 attackers while Nathan neutralized the third. "We need to go. Now," Nathan urged, already securing the descent equipment. "Wait," Mackenzie grabbed his arm, her intense green eyes fixed on his. "In case we don't survive that night in the Italian restaurant." None of it was pretend. Nathan pulled her into an intense, passionate kiss, their first real kiss, ironically in the middle of a firefight. "I wasn't faking it either," he whispered as they broke apart. The moment was interrupted by a grenade rolling through the kitchen. Nathan kicked it away seconds before the explosion, which created the perfect distraction for their escape. They jumped out of the window in sync, the abseiling ropes sliding down the mirrored facade of the Phillips Tower. 47 floors of dizzying descent, as shots ricocheted off the glass around them. "Carlton's going to kill me for compromising the operation," Mackenzie shouted against the wind, an adrenaline-fueled smile on her face. "Morrison is probably already preparing my transfer to some post in Alaska," Nathan replied, equally electrified by the absurd situation. On the 25th floor, one of the shooters managed to hit one of Mackenzie's ropes. Nathan immediately altered his trajectory, managing to reach her and pull her onto his own line. "I've always wanted to tango vertically," she joked, now glued to him as they descended. "Technically, we're actually married now," he replied. "So that's totally appropriate." They hit the ground just as black FBI and DEA vans converged on the scene, sirens cutting through the Manhattan night. Rodriguez and his men had already fled, leaving only chaos behind. "Agents!" Carlton and Morrison shouted simultaneously, running towards them with expressions that mixed relief and fury. "I think we have some explaining to do," Nathan muttered to Mackenzie, still not letting go of her hand. "Several," she agreed, clasping her fingers in his. "But first, we need to find out who really tried to kill us today." Because they both knew that neither the FBI nor the DEA had authorized an execution. Someone else was involved, someone who wanted very much to keep Robert Phillips' secrets buried. As the tactical teams cordoned off the area and the first rays of dawn began to tint the Manhattan sky, Nathan and Mackenzie stood together, their bodies still vibrating with adrenaline and something else that no federal agency had foreseen in their elaborate plans. True love born of a mutual lie. "So," Nathan whispered as his superiors approached, "do you still want to stay married to me, now that you know I'm a lying federal agent?" "Only if you still want me," Mackenzie replied with a smile. "Considering I'm a lying federal agent." The truth had exploded in the most dramatic way possible, but maybe, just maybe, this was exactly what they needed to start something real if they were to survive the wrath of their superiors and find out who was really behind the attack. The FBI interrogation room in Manhattan was buzzing with tension. Mackenzie and Nathan sat side by side, their hands discreetly intertwined under the cold metal table, as they stared into the furious faces of their respective supervisors. 2 years of investigation, Agent Carlton massaged his temples. 2 years of painstaking work potentially compromised because you failed to maintain professionalism. With all due respect, Nathan interjected, his voice firm, I think we have bigger problems to discuss. Someone tried to kill us last night, and it wasn't the FBI or the DEA. Agent Morrison from the DEA, who until then had been watching silently from the corner of the room, approached the table. The attack had the characteristics of a professional military operation: precision, coordination, state-of-the-art equipment. Mercenaries, Mackenzie concluded, probably hired by someone who has a lot to lose if we continue investigating. Vincent Dawson, Nathan and Mackenzie spoke simultaneously, exchanging glances of mutual understanding. Carlton sighed deeply. The problem is that Dawson has disappeared. This private jet took off for Zurich 2 hours after the attack. What about Rodriguez? Nathan asked, leaning forward. We traced him to Miami, Morrison replied, projecting security camera images onto the wall. But we lost the trail at the port. Mackenzie stood up abruptly, moving closer to the images. Wait, that diplomatic bag he was carrying. The camera angle. Nathan joined her, his eyes fixed on the screen. I know that model. It's specially made for transporting sensitive documents. My father had one just like it in the safe at home. Home? Mackenzie turned to him. The Phillips mansion in Greenwich? Exactly, Nathan nodded, an idea forming in his mind. And I bet it still hasn't been completely searched after his death. Carlton and Morrison exchanged worried glances. You two have already compromised this operation too much, Carlton warned. We can't risk. With all due respect, Mackenzie interrupted, her voice carrying an iron determination. We're the only ones who can make this seem natural. After all, we're newlyweds visiting the family home. And we have legitimate coverage, Nathan added. The press are already speculating about our honeymoon. After an hour of heated discussion and strategic planning, the decision was made. Mackenzie and Nathan would ostensibly leave Manhattan for a romantic getaway in Greenwich, Connecticut. In reality, they would have 48 hours to find any evidence that Robert Phillips might have left in his mansion. On the way to Greenwich in Nathan's Aston Martin, the silence between them was laden with unasked questions. So, Mackenzie finally broke the silence. How much of what happened between us was real? Nathan kept his eyes on the road for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Remember when I told you about my mother? About how she died when I was a child? Yes. That was the only complete truth I told you. The rest? It started out as part of the mission, but at some point, he paused, turning briefly to face her. At some point it stopped being an act. Mackenzie smiled softly. You know that story about coming to New York to chase dreams? That was a lie. I came chasing criminals. But when you kissed me for the first time, it was real. The Phillips mansion loomed imposingly among centuries-old trees, a majestic Georgian building that seemed to hold as many secrets as its current visitors. The housekeeper still works here, Nathan explained as he parked. Mrs. Henderson. She practically raised me after my mother died. An elegant lady with gray hair was waiting for them at the front door, her warm smile contrasting with the sobriety of the mansion. Nathan, darling, and this must be your lovely wife. Mackenzie played the part of the delighted bride perfectly, but her trained eyes were already mapping out every detail of the house, every possible hiding place, every escape route. I've prepared the master bedroom for you, Mrs. Henderson announced, leading them up the stairs. Just the way your parents kept it, Nathan. The room was a masterpiece of classical decoration, with a spectacular view of the gardens. But what caught both their eyes was the huge portrait of Robert Phillips over the fireplace. He's smiling, Mackenzie observed when they were alone. In the FBI photos, he never smiles. Nathan approached the painting, studying it intently. This portrait was painted a week before he died. He insisted on wearing this particular suit. The same suit he's wearing in the photo with Rodriguez in Cancun, Mackenzie realized, moving closer. Their hands touched as they simultaneously reached for the edge of the frame. The electric contact between them was still there, stronger than ever, now fueled by the shared truth of their identities. We need to keep pretending, Nathan muttered, although his eyes betrayed a very real desire. For Mrs. Henderson? Or for ourselves? Mackenzie teased, her voice low and intense. Before he could answer, a noise in the garden caught their attention. Through the window, they saw a figure moving between the shadows of dusk. "We're not alone," Nathan realized, already drawing his gun. "We never have been," Mackenzie replied, preparing herself for another night that promised to be anything but peaceful. The secrets of the Phillips mansion were about to come to light, and with them, truths that could change not only the investigation, but also the fate of two agents who found true love amidst an elaborate web of lies. The centuries-old corridors of the Phillips mansion seemed to whisper secrets as Nathan and Mackenzie moved silently towards the garden. The figure they had spotted kept moving between the elaborate topiary, taking advantage of the growing darkness of dusk. "East cover," Mackenzie signaled in hand language, gestures that Nathan immediately recognized from his DA training. They split up with the efficiency of years of field experience, each taking a different flank of the intruder. The crescent moon provided just enough illumination to turn the shadows in the garden into potential threats. The stranger was focused on something near the old Victorian greenhouse, a place Nathan knew well from his childhood. "That's where I last met my father," he had told Mackenzie during the trip. He was different that day, as if he wanted to tell me something important. A metallic noise cut through the silence of the night. Mackenzie froze in her position, her gun firmly in her hands, as she watched the intruder manipulate something on the floor of the greenhouse. Nathan, on the other side, had a moment of sudden clarity. "Wait," he whispered into his communicator. "I know that man." Before Mackenzie could react, Nathan moved from his position, approaching openly. "Harold? Harold Martinez?" The man turned quickly, dropping a wrench. His aged face, marked by decades of work under the Florida sun, relaxed as he recognized Nathan. "Senor Phillips," he replied, his voice heavy with a Mexican accent. "Su padre. Your father told me you were coming." Mackenzie emerged from his position, keeping a safe distance but lowering his gun. Harold Martinez had been mentioned in some FBI reports as a former Phillips Enterprises employee who oversaw operations in Mexico, apparently retired 5 years ago. "Did my father tell you?" Nathan asked, approaching the area where Harold was working. "When?" "The last time we met, right here," Harold replied, gesturing to the floor of the greenhouse. He said, "When my son brings his wife home, show them." I thought it was another one of his eccentricities, but then I saw the news about his wedding. Mackenzie approached, her professional eyes assessing the place. The old stone floor showed subtle marks of recent manipulation. "There's something under these stones," she concluded. "Si, senora," Harold agreed, returning to work with the wrench on a hidden mechanism. Don Roberts spent months preparing this. He said it was insurance against dangerous people. Nathan and Mackenzie exchanged meaningful glances. Robert Phillips had prepared some evidence, knowing that it would eventually be discovered. But why trust a retired employee with this information? With a soft click, a section of the floor moved, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. Harold pulled out a flashlight, illuminating the first few steps. "Shall I wait up here?" he offered. "Please," Nathan replied, pulling out his own flashlight. "And Harold, thank you for keeping your promise to my father." The descent was steep, the steps carved directly into the rock. The air grew colder with every step, heavy with the weight of buried secrets. "Your father planned the whole thing," Mackenzie muttered as they descended. "The bizarre will, our meeting. He knew the agencies would send their best agents," Nathan added. "He wanted to make sure that trustworthy people found it, whatever it was." The staircase ended in a small chamber, its walls lined with metal. In the center, a single digital safe waited. "The date," Nathan muttered, studying the panel. "It must be something significant." Mackenzie consulted her tablet, accessing the case file. "The day your mother died?" Nathan typed in the date. "Nothing happened." "The day you joined the DEA?" Again, "Nothing." "Wait," Nathan paused, an old memory surfacing. "The last time I saw him here in the greenhouse, it was September 7th. He kept repeating it the whole time, as if..." Her fingers flew over the keyboard. 0709-2023. The safe emitted a soft confirmation beep and the door opened. Inside, there was just a USB stick and a letter addressed to "my son and his future wife." With slightly trembling hands, Nathan opened the envelope, while Mackenzie stood guard, her senses alert for any suspicious movement above. "Nathan," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means you found someone special enough to risk everything exactly as I envisioned. The USB stick contains all the evidence needed to expose the operation of Vincent Dawson and his international associates. I should have acted sooner, but my pride and ambition blinded me until it was too late. Protect the person next to you. They are more important than any corporate empire. Love, Dad." Mackenzie felt her eyes moisten, not just at the message, but at the complexity of the plan Robert Phillips had devised. He wasn't just the criminal the FBI was after. He was a man trying to make amends for his mistakes through his son. "We have to get out of here," she whispered urgently. "If Harold has found us, others could be on their way." Nathan agreed, putting away the USB stick and the letter. The sound of engines above confirmed his fears. Headlights illuminated the entrance to the greenhouse, and male voices could be heard giving orders. "Is there another way out?" Mackenzie asked, her back pressed against Nathan's as they both drew their weapons. "There always is," he replied, his fingers finding a hidden panel in the metal wall. "My father never built anything without an escape route." As the first shots began to echo in the garden above, Nathan and Mackenzie plunged into a narrow tunnel, carrying with them not only crucial evidence, but also the growing certainty that their marriage of convenience was turning into something much deeper and truer than either of them could have imagined. The tunnel under the Phillips mansion snaked through the darkness like a concrete artery. Nathan and Mackenzie advanced quickly, their flashlights creating dancing circles on the damp walls as the sound of gunfire above became more and more distant. "My father mentioned these tunnels once," Nathan gasped, guiding them through a fork in the road. Part of the Underground Railroad network from the 19th century. The mansion served as an escape point during the Civil War. "Ironic," Mackenzie commented, checking the flash drive safe in her pocket. "Still serving as an escape route for people seeking justice." A distant rumble made the tunnel vibrate, particles of ancient dust dancing in the torchlight. Someone had discovered the secret entrance to the greenhouse. "How long until we reach the exit?" Mackenzie asked, her professional voice masking her concern. "If my memory serves me right." Nathan paused in front of an old iron door. "It should take us to the old barn, about half a kilometer from the main property." The sound of voices echoing through the tunnel made them speed up. Nathan worked quickly on the old lock while Mackenzie stood guard, her gun ready. "We need to contact our teams," she whispered, checking her cell phone. "No signal down here." "There's an emergency car in the barn," Nathan replied, finally managing to open the door with a metallic creak. "Part of the security protocol I installed when I started working with the DEA." They emerged into a dusty basement, old boxes and farm equipment creating ghostly shadows on the wooden walls. Nathan moved with purpose to a particular corner, removing a tarp that covered a black Jeep Cherokee. "The keys are still in the," he began, but was interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the upper floor of the barn. Mackenzie immediately positioned herself behind a wooden column, signaling Nathan to do the same. Seconds later, the cellar door opened and the light of flashlights swept through the room. "South area clear," a male voice reported over a radio. "Moving to East Sector?" Nathan recognized the voice as one of Dawson's private security guards. This meant that his former mentor was personally involved in the operation to recover the evidence. Mackenzie moved silently towards Nathan, her lips close to his ear. "We need to create a distraction." He nodded, pointing to some fuel barrels in the opposite corner of the basement. A clear shot would cause enough confusion for them to escape. What they didn't expect was that Mrs. Henderson would choose that moment to make her dramatic entrance. The housekeeper appeared at the top of the cellar stairs, carrying an antique rifle as naturally as she served tea. "Young Nathan," she called out, her firm voice surprising the security guards. "I suggest you and your lovely wife run along. I'll entertain our uninvited guests." The security guards turned around, but Mrs. Henderson had already fired 2 well-aimed shots, not to kill, but to create chaos and confusion. "Mrs. Henderson?" Nathan asked, stunned, as he and Mackenzie ran to the Jeep. "Your father wasn't the only one with secrets, dear," the lady replied with an enigmatic smile. "Former NSA, retired 20 years ago. Why do you think he kept me for so long? Mackenzie couldn't help but smile in admiration as she jumped into the passenger seat. Nathan started the engine just as more security guards burst into the barn. "Go," Mrs. Henderson ordered, keeping the invaders busy with her incredible marksmanship. "I'll take care of them." The Jeep tore through the barn doors, tires skidding on the damp grass as Nathan deftly maneuvered between the trees. Mackenzie finally got a signal on her cell phone, quickly contacting her FBI team. "Carlton, we have the package and need immediate extraction. Coordinates being sent." Nathan drove with controlled intensity, his years of training evident in every precise turn. "We also need to find out how Dawson knew we'd be here tonight." "Harold," Mackenzie concluded, her mind putting the pieces together. "He must have been forced to cooperate. Or he's always been loyal to Dawson," Nathan added bitterly. "Another layer of betrayal in my father's empire." A black SUV appeared in the rearview mirrors, its high beams momentarily blinding the couple. Mackenzie turned in her seat, taking precise aim at the tires of the pursuing vehicle. "3 shots, 3 hits," Nathan commented in amazement as the SUV skidded off the road. "Impressive. Best marksman in my FBI class," she replied with a smile. "Something I intend to put on my CV when all this madness is over." More vehicles came up behind them, turning the quiet Greenwich roads into a chase worthy of an action movie. Nathan maneuvered between civilian cars expertly, while Mackenzie alternated between exchanging fire with his pursuers and coordinating the extraction with his teams. "Tactical team in position in 10 minutes, she reported. "We have to get to Route 1. "I know a shortcut," Nathan replied, making a sharp turn onto a side road. "But you won't like it." The shortcut turned out to be an old maintenance trail that cut through a densely wooded area. The Jeep rattled violently as Nathan steered with precision between trees and rocks. "When this is over," Mackenzie shouted over the roar of the engine, "we need to have a serious talk about your definition of shortcut." "When this is over," Nathan replied with a strained smile, "I intend to take you out for a proper dinner. No shooting or chasing." "Promises, promises," she joked, but her smile was genuine. Route 1 came into view just as the first FBI helicopters appeared on the horizon. Nathan guided the Jeep to an abandoned gas station, where tactical teams were already waiting in position. As they were escorted to separate armored vehicles, Nathan and Mackenzie exchanged one last look full of unspoken promises. The USB stick in their hands could expose one of the biggest money laundering operations in recent history, but they both knew they had found something even more valuable that night: a trust and connection that transcended their original missions. The real battle, however, was just beginning. Dawson was still at large, and the revelations contained on that USB stick promised to shake the structures of American corporate power to their foundations. The FBI's operations center in Manhattan was buzzing with frantic activity as forensic technicians worked to decrypt the flash drive recovered from the Phillips mansion. Nathan and Mackenzie, still in their dirty clothes from the tunnel escape, watched through the glass of the digital analysis room. "Is Mrs. Henderson all right?" Mackenzie asked, breaking the tense silence between them. "Yes," Nathan replied, a smile appearing on his lips. "Apparently, she neutralized 3 of Dawson's men before our support team arrived. For a 65-year-old ex-NSA lady, she's still keeping fit." A technician emerged from the room, his pale face reflecting the gravity of the information found. "You need to see this," he said, gesturing for them to enter. The screen showed a complex web of financial transactions, all connecting Phillips Enterprises to various shell companies in Mexico, Panama, and the Cayman Islands. But what really caught the eye were the names associated with the operations. Senators, federal judges, Wall Street executives, Mackenzie listed, his green eyes wide with the extent of the conspiracy. Dawson built an impressive protection network. "It wasn't Dawson," Nathan muttered, pointing to a specific folder in the system. "It was my father. He kept records of everyone involved as collateral. It was his life insurance." Agent Carlton entered the room, accompanied by Agent Morrison from the DEA. "The problem is that this information has now become a death sentence for both of you," Carlton stated somberly. "We already have 3 hacking attempts on our system," the technician reported. "Someone is desperate to access that data." "What about Harold?" Mackenzie asked, remembering the man who had led them to the safe house. "Found dead in a motel in New Jersey," Morrison replied, sliding a photo across the table. "Precision shot. Professional." Nathan felt the weight of guilt on his shoulders. One more death connected to his father's corrupt empire. Mackenzie, sensing his distress, discreetly intertwined her fingers with his under the table. "We have another complication," Carlton continued. "We've just received information that Vincent Dawson is organizing an emergency meeting in Miami. All the key people involved will be there." "This is our chance," Mackenzie declared, straightening up in her chair. "We can get them all at once." "It's also their chance to eliminate all the evidence," Nathan warned. "And anyone who knows too much." A plan began to form, born from the unique combination of their skills and experience. Nathan knew the internal protocols of Phillips Enterprises, while Mackenzie had expertise in FBI undercover operations. "The hotel in Miami," Nathan began, projecting the floor plan on the main screen. "It has a security system that I myself helped develop when I still trusted Dawson, and I have contacts in the Miami police who can cover us without arousing suspicion," Mackenzie added. Already visualizing the operation, Carlton and Morrison exchanged worried glances. "It's too risky," Morrison argued. "You two are their main targets." "That's exactly why it's going to work," Mackenzie insisted. "They expect us to be in hiding, protected by the FBI. Not in Miami, right under their noses." The next few hours were dedicated to meticulously planning the operation. While the tactical teams prepared, Nathan and Mackenzie found a moment of privacy in the break room. "I should have realized before," Nathan muttered, staring into his coffee cup. "All the signs were there. My father, Dawson, the suspicious operations." "Hey." Mackenzie held his face between her hands, forcing him to face her. "You're trying to fix his mistakes. That's what matters."